Bokator master very dangerous to them because they know how to fight. One against two or one against five. They kill that people first. So that I was almost died 3 times.
Bokator, an ancient Cambodian martial art that flourished during the country's Angkorian period, from the 9th to the 15th centuries, and almost perished during the Khmer Rouge in the 1970s, is brought into the spotlight in a new documentary film, Surviving Bokator. Canadian filmmakers Mark Bochsler and partner Sandra Leuba went to Cambodia in the spring of 2010 and met a Khmer Rouge survivor and Bokator grandmaster, Cambodian, who dreams about reviving this unique Khmer martial art. Almost 8 years later, the film was completed and it has now been screened at various film festivals in Cambodia, Canada, and the United States. While on their trip to screen the film in Philadelphia, Mark Bochsler and his team dropped by the Voice of America in Washington to talk with me about the making of Surviving Bokator documentary film, the uniqueness of the Bokator martial art, and the contribution of the film to the Cambodian culture and Cambodia at large. Director Mark Bochsler, thank you for coming to VOA studio in Washington to talk with us about your new film, Surviving Bokator.
Thank you, Chetra, for having me.
Actually, I watched it once, and there's some scene that actually almost made me cry. You did a good job.
Thank you.
Yep. So my first question is, where did this idea for this movie come from?
It wasn't really an idea. I mean, it was, to be honest with you, it was just responding to what I saw was an opportunity. I had an interest in going, my partner and I, Sandra, to Cambodia. We were working in some other places on some other projects in the region, and having grown up in a place near Toronto, Canada, in a multicultural environment, I very much love cultures. And we had came across a story about a martial art, which was just coming back at the time. Just went through some postings on Facebook and learned about the grandmaster Cambodian, and decided we wanted to meet him. And we just learned of his story and his backstory. We learned about Bokator, that Bokator was, was part of the Angkorian kingdom, the empire. Its markings can be found on Angkor Wat. And then, of course, the history with the Khmer Rouge and the cultural devastation that Cambodia faced from that. And it was just, we felt that it was kind of our place to tell this story. Now, I'll say this, it wasn't meant to be a 5-year endeavor. Actually, it's become an 8-year endeavor now. With 3 years of editing. It was meant to initially be more of a short project, just to do something which was more informational, let's put it that way. But the time that we were with the grandmaster, and of course meeting his students, they were just such amazing people, such fabulous energy, and of course the story, as you see in the film, continues to grow and grow and grow, and so it just became, it blossomed actually. You know.
We were a great power. And Bokator technique, that is our weapon. We're going to bring back our culture. It's Bokator. We survive Bokator together in the team.
Yeah. So before we go to talking about how you approach the grandmaster and the students, how much do you just exposed to Bokator like 8 years ago?
Yeah,
What do you think about the art? I mean, what do you think about Bokator as a martial art?
I'm not a martial artist to begin with. As I mentioned, I'm a culture fanatic, but what I learned about Bokator, and the fact that it's drawn from how animals fight and how they defend themselves, and also all the 12 positions, and it struck me as something incredibly fascinating. And to see that the world community are beginning to, in a lot of ways, lose some of these traditions that have been around for 3,000 years, let's say, to be able to shine a spotlight on the revival of Bokator, for me was just an amazing opportunity and a very proud opportunity, to be honest with you. But I love watching Bokator. Bokator is rooted in, as I mentioned, great tradition. There's dance. There's a lot that goes into it, and we're just very proud to have in the studio later on, of course, a martial artist, Ted Watsam.
So, going back to approaching the grandmaster and the student,
Yeah.
how did you pitch the idea to them and get them to agree to do this?
A bit of trickery. No. I had sustained actually an injury the day before I arrived at Grandmaster's gym, his club. My Achilles tendon on my right foot was nearly severed, and so I hobbled up the stairs. He lives, or he worked at the time. His facility was on the second floor above a parking garage, and there was quite a stairway that you had to navigate to get up. And then I started filming at the end of that meeting that we had for 4 hours, and I think it was just the determination that they saw that we had to make this thing happen. And don't forget that it wasn't meant to be a long project at all. So, and Grandmaster himself was trying to obviously get a lot of attention to what he was doing for financing, but also to get new students. And so the project just continued to evolve and to grow, and I just kept coming back almost every day for the first 7 months. And I learned later that they would roll their eyes. They would go, "Oh no, this guy's coming back again." So, but we built kind of it was a kind of family after a while. You know, it just was a certain trust that we had with one another.
If I may, I would want to know, what are the challenges that you face during the 8 year? I mean, further than just your injuries and other things.
Well, physically, I mean, the injury was certainly substantial for 4 weeks at the start of our shooting. But it wasn't until we got back from Cambodia that we went out and we tried to raise funds because we started shooting instantly. We didn't raise funds beforehand like you would normally do with a documentary, or with any kind of film for that matter. But it was just trying to get the funds after the fact, and then hiring the crews with limited resources. And we were also going through a growth process of our own, Sandra and I, in terms of trying to structure such a massive story, because we had 400 hours of footage. We had 12 initial subjects that we were following, and we had our first version of the film was 3 hours long. So we had to chop everything down, and we went through 3 restructures of the film before we finally ended up with the film that you saw the other day. So, but I would say the financing was we just had to get through it. We were determined to finish it, but now we have some bills to pay, and so it's yeah.
Finance is a very major issue, but how about the process of filming or following the students? Or, I mean, Cambodian culture is where it's not that open, right? When you open the doors to someone and to follow, tell their personal stories and all that. Did you face any challenge with that as well?
That's a good question. I mean, especially from a non-Cambodian and a non-Asian. I guess it really came down to the relationships we built in the first 7 months, because we were, as I mentioned before, we were close. We were like a family. There was a really strong degree of trust, and trust and these kind of relationships blurs all other lines that are there. And so once we came back to Canada, and I would come back sometimes over the next 5 years for a couple of weeks or a month or so. We always, in the meantime, maintain this close tie, usually through Facebook or through other social media. So it wasn't difficult to sort of maintain those bonds. And of course, when you see in the film, there's a lot of emotion that happens, but a lot of the emotion happens from issues that are very deep and tragic. In the case of the Grandmaster, which is things that you would normally open up to perfect strangers. So I think it's amazing that they trusted us so much, Sandra and I, and what you see in the film is really, it's deep, it's emotional, and a lot of people are responding to it. And quite frankly, this is an amazing part of Cambodia that I don't think a lot of people see. The film really shows a different part of the country.
They want to survive Bokator or not.
how much we learn, we will show to the world. We're not afraid.
I want my dream come true to myself, to my country, and to our young generation and the world.
What were the audience reactions so far that you screened the film in some places already, right?
So we did initial screening in Long Beach, California last year, and the audience was mixed. Part were Khmer, and then the other part were gringos or what have you. And we found that especially there's a lot of young people there who were born in America, who hadn't experienced the genocide that their parents had. And for them, the film was more about reclaiming their sense of self, their own identity, their sense of national pride, what it's like to be Khmer. It was informational in some regard, but also it allowed them to sort of connect to their brothers and sisters on the other side of the ocean that are back in Cambodia that may be having a similar journey, you know, in the relationship with their parents, for example. Another thing that was very eye-opening for me is we've had a lot of response from, let's say, Holocaust museums in Montreal and some other cities who've reached out to us, having learned about the film, in that there's a theme of trauma in the film and overcoming trauma and healing, and that they really connect with that theme. So there's a lot of things that are happening, and it's not a film necessarily for Cambodians per se or for martial artists, but it's just the audience is growing and growing, and everyone who comes into the theater to see the film takes away their own thing from it.
I'm happy for that result. Do you have plan to bring this film to Cambodian? To the Cambodian audience, like for the Khmer people?
Absolutely. So we did our world premiere in Phnom Penh, part of the Cambodian International Film Festival this past March. And we had 3 shows, all sold out. And it was great to sort of see that reception. We had a lot of high-level people there, a lot of government. In fact, the Minister of Culture was there. We are now planning in early 2019 to go actually beyond that. Now that we've been touring the film a little bit in America and in Canada, to bring it back and to go to some other theaters, for example, in Siem Reap, and also to go out into the countryside. We're planning actually a mobile cinema.
Oh, that's cool, like in a field.
Yeah, exactly. So you can go to like Kampot, or you can Kampong or somewhere like that, and you can set up an inflatable screen.
That's very cool.
And then you project at nighttime, and you sell popcorn or whatever you want to sell. You know,
very cool. I'm sure that there will be some vendor trucks of food and some
exactly.
What they call a sugarcane juice store and all that.
Everyone tried to, exactly.
It's a good experience. So this is my last question. In what way does the film contribute to the cast member, Bokator, martial art, and Cambodia positively?
Well, as I alluded to before, I think it shines a very different light on Cambodia in terms of not being a film about the genocide or land appropriation or corruption. I mean, there's a lot of things that people outside of Cambodia perhaps associate Cambodia with. That was not the Cambodia we experienced. Ours was about a place of youth and, you know, a bunch of very different elements. And it also shines a spotlight on Bokator and the efforts of people in Cambodia, and not only grandmaster but the other surviving masters to bring it back. And this is a struggle that I think a lot of people can understand when they see the film, the value of culture, and also how precious Khmer culture really is and how unique Khmer culture really is, you know, both in Southeast Asia, between its neighbors, and of course internationally. So, but I'm just hoping with Terwat that, I mean, she's been able to carve her own path as, first of all, an actress, and also an MMA fighter now. But also with Derit, he's leading now the Cambodian national team, Bokator team, that is. And but I'm hoping that it somehow gives them a leg up, you know, a bit more of attention, a bit more spotlight to make their path now a bit easier.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bochsler.
Thank you so much for having me.
On the film again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.